Welcome back. Here we are with another episode of Bird Brain Q&A. I'm your host, Lauren Benedict. I will be answering questions about birds along with my co-host, Pam Moore.
I am your co-host. I will be asking questions about birds.
That's how we roll.
And we have some really good questions for you today, folks. We are excited to dive in. We are back with episode 7, Bird Behaviors. How do they decide what to do? And actually, I'm wondering, Lauren, if you can confirm or like deny that I have been correct. Because a lot of times my husband will ask me, like, why did you do that? I'm kind of an impulsive person. And I'll just say, like, I'm like an animal, babe. Like, I just do stuff. Like, I don't know why I do things. I just, like, but maybe I've underestimated animals. Like, do animals maybe have more capacity for planning than we thought? I think we're going to get into that in this episode.
We are. They do, many of them do have some capacity for planning, but they also just do things. I mean, the word decision implies some kind of conscious thought, like you had to think about where you were going to put that thing. But we make decisions all the time without really thinking about it, and animals do too. And I feel like we can call that a decision. If they had multiple options of things to do and they did A versus B, they made some kind of decision and they showed some behavior, and there are reasons for that. And instinct usually is a pretty good guide to the things that will help you survive. But sometimes we get it wrong, and so do the animals.
Okay, cool. And can we just quickly do a rundown of like what's the difference between instinct and say what we might call intuition?
That's an interesting, let's see.
Like breathing, instinct.
Yes. Instinct is generally thought of by biologists as something that you do that you don't have to learn at all, right? There's no learning involved. It's something that you or an animal, that any organism does just naturally, innately. It is in some way probably coded for within the genetics of that organism. Intuition can actually be partially learned. So intuition has some aspect of instinct, but the more you have experienced a situation over time, the more you have an intuition for what might happen next. And you might do it without making a conscious decision. You might have some behavior you show that is sort of intuitive, that is still partly learned, so maybe not totally instinctual.
Right. Yeah. But like for example, like an intuition might be, let's go to this restaurant and not that restaurant. I have a weird feeling about that one. And then you find out there was like a fire in that one when you were going to go there. That's not instinct. That could be intuition,
Yeah, that's probably intuition. And that
right?
might have been some subtle cue that you didn't pick up on, but it kind of smelled like smoke in that direction. And so you decided you didn't want to go there.
Maybe we're getting too in the weeds. I just want to
Yeah.
make sure that we are clear on what we're talking about before we dive into why the heck are birds doing what they're doing.
Yeah. Because when we talk about behaviors, there is this notion that they have options, right? And they don't always have to show this behavior. Some behaviors, though, are innate. So spiders spinning webs, the shape of that web seems to be totally innate. They can do it without any learning. Whereas other behaviors that we might talk about today, things like bird migration or bird reasoning and bird movement patterns, that might be something that's not totally innate, and they have to make some choices about those behaviors.
Okay, very cool. I guess we're going to get into that. Why don't we, should we start with our first question?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, this is from Bill. Why do quail run away instead of fly away? I didn't even know quail did that. Is quail another quail, or quail the only bird to do that?
They're not. There are a number of birds that do that. If you could picture a quail, though, picture a cute little fat, round California quail or a Gambel's quail or something like that. If you can imagine that quail, they are rather rotund. They have a very large body. They actually have pretty small wings for their body size. That's why they're so good to eat, right? There's a lot of body there. Tasty, those quail. And given that, they can't really fly for super long, sustained periods of time. Quail have these little wings, big fat bodies. They can take off really rapidly. They have muscles that allow them to fly, so they can fly away from you, but they can't stay in the air for very long and keep flying. So for them, if they can get away without having to use all that energy, that rapid burst of energy to fly, they can just run into the bushes. They will absolutely prefer to do that. It's much more energy efficient than trying to take off with this giant football of a body that they have.
That's so interesting. Do you want to know a fun fact I learned? Sprinters, like human sprinters, there's an association or a correlation between sprinters and having a body type that tends to store a little more fat in the belly area.
Interesting.
I
Yeah, that's
know.
something to think about. I know
So,
there are different kinds of muscle that humans and animals can have, and some of them are really good, fast twitch, slow twitch. You've probably heard of this. So
yeah.
quail have a lot of the fast twitch muscle for taking off, but they don't have much of the slow twitch for continuing to fly long distances.
Right, that's the
They're like
type
when they're
one. You
running.
can develop both types of muscle fibers through training, but certainly through genetics, people are naturally born with more of one or the other typically. Okay, that's so interesting, and it makes me want to try eating quail. Quick question, you did say there are other birds that do it, same as quails. Do they have similar body types?
Yeah, this is a thing that a lot of the quail-like and turkey-like birds, remember we talked about turkeys last time or in a previous episode? Turkeys can fly. Chickens can fly, but they rarely do it. If you've ever seen a turkey in flight, it's the weirdest thing. It's like a dinosaur flying overhead. It's just bizarre because we almost never see turkeys in flight. They're the same way. It's hard for them to take off. They are much more efficient at running away from you.
Huh. Are they typically successful? Like, who are their predators? Who are they running from? And
Quail are running from a number of different things. If a quail is running from a hawk or a falcon, an aerial predator, there it totally makes sense to run, right? Because they can get into the underbrush. If they're running from a fox or something like that, maybe they want to take off, get a little bit of airtime, and then they can land far away and keep running.
gosh, we're learning so much. Okay, this one is from Kathy, and she asks, when they fly in V formation, how does the flock decide which bird to follow? Do they have a pecking order or take turns in the lead?
The
As a
group
cyclist, I have a
composition.
lot of questions about this because it reminds
Yeah.
me a lot of riding in a peloton or a pace line.
Yeah. When you're in the peloton, what do you do?
It sort of happens naturally. Like typically the fastest person will be at the front, but they typically will not want to be at the front forever. And it also depends what's going on. If it's a group ride and everyone's just trying to show off, maybe the fast people will try to stay in the lead as long as they can. On the other hand, if it's like more of a fun ride, we take turns. We might even time it. Like everybody takes a couple minutes in the front and then they peel off and go to the back and you rotate. Or if it's a race, a lot of times the fastest person will save their energy by hanging out in the back so that they can attack later and sprint to the front and win. So it depends.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the geese are doing one of your friendly rides most of the time. They're all going somewhere together. And often you do see them trading off. So you have the nice V, and there's a bird at the front, and eventually that bird just cycles around to the back, and the next one moves up to the front. And they do this, and it's exactly like when you're in a peloton where the bird that is at the front has the most wind resistance, so they're working the hardest. And they do that for a while, and then they let somebody else do the work. So they trade off.
That makes me unreasonably happy to know that like my sport is just like birds.
Yeah, you're all using the same principles of physics. It's true.
So
There
fun.
are some situations in which one bird might stay at the front for longer. So sometimes you'll have, say, just a family of geese traveling together. And in that case, the parents will generally stay ahead, take the brunt of the work, as parents do, and lead the way. There are also some species in which the older birds or the more experienced birds will go first and they'll lead the way and they'll be at the front for longer. But yeah, they absolutely trade off.
That's cool. Didn't we touch on the role of older birds in the flock in the last episode?
Yeah, a little bit when we were talking about the Tanzania, that those experienced birds sometimes will be the ones in the lead.
That's right. And they may have quite a bit of intuition. And finally, also from Kathy, I love this. Do they know where they're going, or do they just fly around until a place catches their attention?
A little bit of both sometimes for different birds. There are a lot of birds that migrate, and this is not just geese anymore. I'm just talking about generally birds. There are a lot of birds that migrate that do know where they're going. They will leave a breeding territory somewhere, say, my backyard in Colorado, and fly down to Central America, South America, where they'll spend the winter, and then they'll come back and they might breed in exactly the same spot next year. So they might not just be looking for any place that's good. They might be looking for their specific territory that they have bred on or right near where they were raised. There are lots of birds that do that. They know exactly where they're going.
When you say exactly, do you mean the same park or the same area or like even the same tree, same zip code? What do you mean?
Possibly even the same tree. Yep.
Wow.
There are birds that will fly thousands of miles on their migratory path and come back to exactly the same place, which is pretty amazing. But there are also moments where they don't know exactly where they're going, where they're in transit, they're on migration, and they need to stop and get some food. And this happens a lot. There's this notion of fallout among birders, which is not the kind of fallout that non-birders usually talk about, but essentially it's the idea that there might be a group of migratory birds that are in the process of migration and suddenly some weather event comes in, right? They hit a big thunderstorm and they all have to stop and they just look around for whatever habitat seems appealing and suddenly they all land there. I had this was actually the most amazing example of this for me personally in my life was when I went to an ornithology conference years ago in New Orleans, right when a hurricane came in. And because the hurricane came in, suddenly all of the trees outside of the conference center was just dripping with birds right in the middle of the city because they clearly were looking for any place they could land.
Wow. Can we come back to the question of how they're finding these spots? Do do you know if okay, so say they really want the same tree. They don't just want the same area, they want the same tree. Do they typically go right to it like they had a GPS saying now take a right, now veer left, or is it like they get close? This always happens to me even with a GPS. It's when I get close that I get confused and I start being like, well, here, no, there, turn around. Like, how do they operate?
They go pretty much to it. It depends on the bird, and they haven't done this for every species of birds, but this homing instinct has been studied best in pigeons because, of course, pigeons are known for that, right? There are homing pigeons that will come back to their roost, and there are lots of other species where they've done this too, where they send them out and they'll kind of move them in complicated patterns, and those birds often can fly straight back to where they started.
While we're on the topic, this is a question I've been kind of asking for years. Do people home? You mentioned the birds have the homing instinct. It seems to me we should be saying somebody is homing in on something, like when you're getting close and you're sharpening your
Mm.
skills or whatever. Are we homing in? Because I know you also honed skills, as in sharpen one's skills, but are we homing in or are we honing in? Can we settle this debate for once? What do you say? You say homing in?
I don't know what I said. I don't know.
I avoid the phrase entirely because I don't know how to use it.
Yeah.
I just did a quick Google and it is home, M with an M, Home. And it's
Can we?
often used. I say honing, honing in. The
But it's
sounds right.
homing in.
Homing in.
It's homing in.
It's
If
homing
you guys
in. Yes,
want to
you
resolve
hone a skill, but you home in on some target.
Boom. Are we ready to move on to the next question?
Yeah. Next question.
This one is from Esther. Do the Canada geese in Colorado stay here all year?
Yeah, this is kind of a follow-up on this idea of do they just fly around randomly? How do they pick where they're going? What are they doing? Those Colorado geese, many of them stay here all year, but not all of them. We actually live in a place, because Pam and I both live in Colorado. So we happen to be in a part of the range of the Canada goose where we have a resident population. Lots of those individuals are here all year, but we also have migratory populations. So there are some birds here in the summer that don't spend the winter here, and there are some birds here probably in the winter that don't spend the summer here. So you never know when you look at an individual Canada goose in your local park whether it's somebody that's going to be here all year or not. It's this whole mishmash. They have these really complicated movement strategies, and the migratory processes and the migratory patterns of that species are very mixed.
Now I'm really curious. I think there's always tensions in a town when there's like, I went to school in kind of a college town, but there was like the college students and then there was the townies. In a summer community, like a summer hotspot, there's like the vacationers and the locals. There's tensions. Are there tensions between Canada geese of different communities, whether they're migratory or hanging out all year?
I think that is an awesome research project that somebody should do. And I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but you could so test that. You could see if the resident geese are really protective of their space, say, and don't let the migrants into those maybe best habitats that they've already started to defend, like, all the golf courses where they can eat all the
Yeah.
grass, and poop all over the place.
How about we move on to the next question? I feel like we covered that last one, like amazing.
I'm ready.
We've got this one from Phil. How much time does an eagle have to spend hunting?
Yeah,
I'm
there's
wondering
another
if Phil means
decision.
like hours per day or per week, or does Phil mean like as a percentage of time they spend? What I don't know what Phil means, but do we even know?
We do. Actually, this one
We
I can
know.
give you a much better number on than some of the others because I checked it. Yeah. And I think this, again, thinking about behavioral decisions, right? an eagle could be doing all sorts of things with its time. How much time does it have to go out and actually look for food in order to sustain itself? And there are people that went out and watched a bunch of eagles and measured what they did with their time. And I made a little notes on this one because there are actually studies telling you this. So one study on bald eagles discovered that they spend 94% of their time during daylight hours on average just hanging out perched. They're just sitting there, which means there's only about 6% of their time left for going out and looking for food. So they don't spend a whole lot of time hunting. And there was a study on golden eagles that did something similar. And this is when they have babies. So when they're nesting, they probably have to hunt a little more than when they're not nesting because you're not just feeding yourself, you're also feeding all those babies that are growing. The males spent about 78% of their time just perched, and the females 85% of their time. So that's like 15 to 20% of their time that they're even away from the nest, potentially hunting, and they're only hunting a small fraction of that time. So, surprisingly, not very much. They have really high value prey, and you probably only need to spend a little bit of your day hunting if you're an eagle, catching a duck or whatever, bring it home, feed it to the chicks, spend the rest of your day sitting around. Eagles are like the lions of the bird world, where they hunt once and then they spend a long time just sitting around eating it. Something like a chicken or a seed-eating bird spends a lot more of its day hunting. A hummingbird has to spend a lot of its time getting nectar from flowers, but an eagle doesn't.
So would it be fair to say that they're super efficient in their hunting skills in that they're not like going to try to grab this fish, they miss, now they spend 20 minutes trying to find the next one, or like what's their success rate?
Yeah, eagles are pretty good. They hit their prey a lot of the time. They'll also scavenge things. So for that, if you're looking around or flying around, you see something dead, there it is. You don't have to do the work to catch it. And they also use that strategy that we talked about last time, kleptoparasitism, where they will steal food from others. So an eagle might see, a gull or whatever with the fish that it pulled out of the water and whoop, I'll take that. I was once at a picnic for a group of people that were working on seabirds, restoring seabirds to islands. And we were all barbecuing, we had the grill out and we're hanging out, and somebody points up and they're like, look, an osprey. And there was an osprey flying over with a fish in its talons. And we're all like, oh, cool, pretty good sized fish. And suddenly a bald eagle swoops in to harass the osprey to try and steal its fish. The osprey gets all befuddled, drops the fish right in the middle of our group. The eagle looks at us and decides to fly away. It's not going to grab the fish from the middle of a huge group of people. So we picked it up and we put it on the grill.
Were you a group of ornithologists?
Yes,
That's amazing.
the birds were thanking us for our work in helping them. That's how we liked to think about it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Um, and I think this is our final question, although it's really never final because I'm definitely going to have follow-up questions because I always do. But this one is from Kathy. Kathy says, I read an article saying that I love this question, crows use statistical reasoning to make decisions. How do scientists know they do that? Kathy, thank you for asking. It's such a good question.
I mean, I don't think the scientists think that they're doing the math in their head, writing out their notes in the notebook or anything like that. But they're using statistical principles to make decisions, which is really cool that they can assess that. And I think what Kathy is referring to is a study where what they did is they trained the crows to peck at a screen for different stimuli. So like red dot or blue dot. So they would show them a whole bunch of red dots, and if you pecked 50% of the time, the bird got a reward. And then they'd show a bunch of blue dots. And if you pecked at the blue dot 90% of the time, the bird got a reward. And they just did this for like a week and thousands of red dots and blue dots. So the birds kind of learned the patterns. And then they gave them a test where they said, okay, now you can see the red and the blue. Which do you prefer? If they learned that they get a reward 50% of the time with red and 90% of the time with blue, you do better to pick blue. And they did. They generally picked blue. So they understood the kind of statistical reward probabilities of each thing. And by setting up that trial, that's how the scientists concluded that.
That is fascinating. But it almost seems like that kind of language gives the birds a little too much credit because I'm thinking of like when I was a child, it was known in my family that like my dad was more of a soft touch. So like if you wanted something, it was in your best interest to ask dad first. Once mom said no, that was it. It was not happening. If you got to dad first and he said yes before there's a conversation, you're probably gonna get it, right? And that was I'm no math whiz, but that was sort of like adaptive, you could say.
Yeah, that might have been your intuition at the time. Back to this idea of learning and how that contributes to intuition. You just kind of had this intuition. I might do better here if I pick the blue dot because dad's the really generous one.
Yeah, totally. I love how we like brought it full circle. That's so interesting to me that like scientists thought to even con conduct that experiment. That's really interesting. So we know that tells us a lot. That tells us birds are capable of learning. Um, they're going to do what's in their best interest. They're
Mm-hmm.
smart.
Mm-hmm.
They
They
can
can
recognize
remember things over
patterns.
time because it was a learned, they had to learn this over a little bit of time. Yeah,
I wonder, it would be interesting to see if they set up these test conditions for different birds or different species and they tested them on what they had learned at different intervals to just to see like what birds learned most quickly.
that would be super interesting. And I bet crows would be really fast because they did this study on crows, and crows are notoriously smart, good learners. They're related to jays. We said previously that jays are super smart birds. Crows are too. If you did it with chickens, maybe it would take them a little longer. I don't know. All I know is that in my flock of backyard chickens, some of them are very smart and learn things very quickly, and they know where the food is, and some of them do not.
Yeah, so there's a lot of diversity even within species, within communities.
Yep. Yep. Individuals learn different things at different rates, but there's also a species effect.
It's fascinating.
I'll just say that that kind of setting up this very specific, maybe surprising and seemingly esoteric experiment is part of what's fun about being an ornithologist. We love this stuff, right? We're like, let's think about how we can test this really specific idea of whether a bird can learn differences in statistical probabilities. And then they figure out a way to do it. And that's great. It's actually being a scientist is a very creative endeavor trying to figure out how you can ask those questions in ways that the birds can answer when they can't just tell you.
Absolutely. I think it's a what not a misnomer. It's a what is the word I'm looking for? It's a lie, it's a myth, it's a disservice, I think, to children who are trying or young people who are trying to choose a career path to sort of be presented with this idea that arts and sciences are diametrically opposed. To me, what I hear you describing actually is love. Like when you really love something, you get really curious about it, how to be good at it, how to understand every facet about it. And like everything you just described, like obviously I enjoy this podcast, but I'm not an ornithologist because I don't love birds the way you love birds. And I love that you do. Like I love other things. And I think I think it's a testament to finding something that you love enough to want to know all the minutia about what it is and how to be good at it.
And that wanting to know is a big part. When I was a kid, loved mystery novels. I still love a good mystery novel. And doing science is kind of like solving a mystery.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, because you don't know what the answer is, but you can figure out some way to gather evidence. You gather your clues, you put all the evidence together, and then you make your conclusions about what must have happened.
Well, I think love is a great topic to end on. I have loved asking questions about bird behaviors, and I love everybody for showing up and listening or watching.
Yeah, and I hope that you now have the intuition that you want to watch another one of these, maybe.
And if you do, we have a whole library of them because now we're on our seventh and we have plans to release more. So stay tuned, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. That's where you can find out more about the species you love so much
Come back next time for more questions and answers about birds.
because no question is too flighty for us.